Book 3, Temporal Anomaly. When the past and future cease to be variables, true purpose can only exist in the moment. Dacheldor. Clashing Timelines. Dacheldor fell to his knees, screaming on the battlefield. His mind whirled with memories of conflicting timelines, trying to reconcile each one, but unable to do so. One timeline matched exactly the history described in Books 1 and 2, ending the moment he merged with his ancient self. Another paralleled it closely, but with significant differences and the same ultimate end. Countless others were similar, with further changes. In some, he merged with his ancient self sooner. In others later, all ended the same way. Lastly, the most recent timeline mirrored the original nearly perfectly, but with several minor changes, the most significant of which was that it had not ended yet. A part of him felt as if he had just reached out to merge with his ancient self, but another part was aware of the current timeline. His current location in time was shortly after the full conquest of Limbo by Darkfire. He was the head general and had recently gifted Darkfire the Rings of Immortality. His life mirrored his original memories exactly, up until the point in time where he first met the First Knight. On that occasion, and in every timeline after the original, the First Knight prognosticated a horrific future. "You are destined to be the destroyer of the cosmos. Though I've tried again and again, I have thus far been unable to avert that fate." This had chilled Dacheldor when he had been told, and altered events slightly from the original history going forward. The most significant change was that Dacheldor spent more time with the First Knight, and managed to find love within himself sooner, leading him to Daisy far before the war with the Overlord was even possible. His son Derek was also born early, though ultimately seemed to turn out to be the same person, and, having not awoken the Black Angel in this timeline, joined the Angels after being thoroughly tested. After this, Dacheldor and Daisy ended up going their own ways. Dacheldor's work with Darkfire was mostly the same, but the First Knight spent time working with Darkfire and Bylon directly on their time device, sending Bylon away sooner and revealing the fact that he was in fact Bylon sooner as well. Now that Dacheldor had the memories of the other timelines to compare, he wondered if Bylon had completed his training to become a Time Lord, and reversed time the moment Dacheldor had tried to merge with his ancient self. It seemed, whatever he had learned across these multiple timelines had led Bylon to believe the risk of tampering more directly with time was worth it. Now, Dacheldor was on a battlefield facing what seemed to be an unwinnable scenario. He had faced it and failed, then abruptly a new timeline popped into mind, where he faced it with new orders from Darkfire and failed again. Then another timeline, and another. His guess, Darkfire was testing the time machine, trying to get the perfect win condition for this battle. Still, this did not explain the pain splitting through Dacheldor's head, and why he suddenly recalled all these timelines. As he began to recover, timelines prior to the original filled his mind as well, timelines where he had not had his life altered by Bylon's meddling. It seemed he had somehow gained the ability to recall every timeline he had ever existed in. Perhaps this was an accident caused by Darkfire's repeated, back-to-back use of the time machine. He strode forward in combat, this time aware of all that was to come in the battle, and defeated the enemy perfectly. Time did not loop. Darkfire had accepted this outcome and not used the time machine again. Dacheldor rushed back to Castle Darkfire, where he overheard Bylon scolding Darkfire about the misuse of the time machine. As he listened, he also scanned Bylon's thoughts and discovered he was concerned that too much exposure to changing timelines could cause a person to become an aberration. Dacheldor delved deeper into Bylon's mind and discovered an aberration was a being whose consciousness became aware of all timelines, thus remembering all iterations of the past. Additionally, any time someone traveled back in time for any reason, the aberration would find themselves suddenly in that time as well. Thus, time travelers would have no means of manipulating the past of the aberration. Bylon's fear seemed to stem specifically around a concern of not being able to change Dacheldor's future if he were to become an aberration. This seemed tied to his prognostication that Dacheldor would destroy the cosmos, but he could not discern the specifics of this. He wondered what Bylon had witnessed that had caused him to reverse time so many times. Dacheldor did not speak to Bylon about this, and chose to hide the fact that he had indeed become an aberration. He hoped to learn more about what Bylon was planning first. He also took note that his body was different, more closely resembling the physicality of the third incarnation as opposed to his first, though no one could tell to look at him. He also still had all the abilities, power, and knowledge of his previous timelines, making him a full Realm Lord even though he had yet to enter the Realm Lord school in this timeline. The only thing he could not recall was what happened after merging with the ancient self. To get a bearing on his current situation, he noted that the current timeline was at a point in history several years prior to when the Overlord attacked Limbo. This time, he thought to himself, he would be able to destroy the Overlord without the losses to the Empire. His son, Mikhail, would not have to die. He decided not to reveal that he had become an aberration to Bylon until after that event. The Passage of Time. It took some time for Dacheldor to be comfortable working for the Empire again, though, in the current timeline, the conquest of Limbo was a recent thing. In all the others, he had lived beyond his allegiance to Limbo. Dacheldor did his best to appear unaware of the future, trying to mimic his old actions and abilities without giving away his true knowledge or capability. He also worked to mimic his old personality. Reminiscing helped him eventually feel comfortable as the head general once again. On occasion, Bylon or Darkfire would go back in time for one reason or another. When this occurred, Dacheldor would suddenly find himself further in the past as well. He would know exactly when and where he was, but had no control of when this happened. He did his best to repeat his old actions again and again as these time loops occurred. His number one priority was to keep Bylon from knowing what he had become. Though Bylon, as the first knight, had said he was working to free Dacheldor from a fate of destroying the cosmos, Dacheldor was unsure he believed this. Now that he recalled all timelines, he knew without a doubt how much Bylon had manipulated his past for his own gain during the war with the Overlord. He could not be sure Bylon had his best interests in mind. On occasion, time would reverse, and it would not be caused by Bylon or Darkfire. Any time travel affected Dacheldor. This could get tedious, and it was hard for Dacheldor to mirror exactly what he had done before on any given day. He began finding newfound friendships with other people in the Empire he had not noticed so readily in the past. Keeping these friendships at least partly secret was a must. Dacheldor also noticed that Bylon's actions did not mirror what they had when time was reversed. This indicated to Dacheldor that Bylon was himself an aberration, traveling through time anytime someone changed time. He wondered if he and Bylon were the only ones. He started to take note of any time Bylon behaved differently around him than he had in a previous timeline. When that happened, he would be sure to have a strong reaction to it, indicating what Bylon said or did may have affected his mood. Using this as an excuse, he could change his behavior during the days ahead, without giving away his knowledge of the altered timelines. Dacheldor had to be careful how he acted around people he had spent most of his past with, but could be looser with those he had not. As a result, 2 strong new friendships formed. He started performing his training alongside another general named Phi Kara. She often challenged him, and he found this entertaining. He also spent many evenings hitting the town with the Empire's highest-ranked assassin, Den Neti. Den was a monkin, a being that appeared as a cross between a demon and a monkey. His appetites for food, fun, and sex were wild, and likely caused by needing to unwind after what he had to do for work. Dacheldor could relate to this desire to let loose, and found spending time with Den gave him an excuse to have more fun. On occasion, Den would proposition Dacheldor for sex or sparring, but Dacheldor refused. Den's appetites were far more open than his, but they both found each other's company amusing. Phi Kara also seemed attracted to Dacheldor. She had first noticed him during the Grand Tournament, where they had both become generals. Since then, she had worked to become stronger than he, so she could challenge him in the ways she had. Now that he was taking interest in those challenges, she was taking interest in him. She refused, however, to have an intimate relationship with him because of their work relationship. When time came for Dacheldor to assign a new captain for the flagship of his forces, he chose Den. This put them in contact both during and outside of work. When a mission required him to work alongside another general, he chose Kara. This made the newest timeline more interesting to him. Bylon took note of these changes, but appeared to brush them off. Whatever he was up to, these alterations to the timeline did not concern him. Having scanned his thoughts a few times, Dacheldor could tell that Bylon was not suspicious of him at all. Return of the Overlord. When the Overlord arrived in Limbo, Dacheldor was ready for him. He listened to the Overlord's offer to join him. He watched the Overlord elaborate on the team they could be, but all he could think about was how many of his friends and fellow soldiers had died in the previous timelines because of the Overlord, his son Mikhail among them. He did not answer the Overlord. He instead gave in to the chance to reveal his knowledge. He asked the Overlord how Headmaster Genus was doing. When the Overlord did not recognize the name, he corrected himself to say Edge. The Overlord raised his arms, covering himself in what he believed was an impenetrable armor. Dacheldor swung the demon edge through him, splitting him from head to crotch. The Overlord fell dead after a single blow. Dacheldor reached out a hand and shattered the Overlord's soul, transforming his body into cinders as he did. He breathed a sigh of relief. His son and the Empire would be spared. As he had in the past, he approached Darkfire and informed him of the Overlord's offer. This time, though, he informed that the Overlord was dead. Bylon seemed concerned, but Dacheldor elaborated, saying a white light seemed to glow from him, shattering the Overlord's armor. Bylon accepted that having Dacheldor meet Daisy early must have been the cause of this change. Dacheldor then gave the exact locations of the Overlord's forces in Limbo. When asked how he knew, he said he had seen it in the Overlord's mind. Darkfire set a plan in motion to attack the Overlord's secret locations, and with Dacheldor's help, the Empire suffered minimal casualties. Bylon's thoughts betrayed to Dacheldor that he was impressed at the outcome. He was happy to see this war had ended without having to reveal the truth to Darkfire and Dacheldor. It would be many years before Edge would arrive in Limbo, and in no previous timeline had Dacheldor stayed on as head general. This time, he had no reason to leave, so he stayed. From here forward, he could do what he wished without worrying of it being compared to a past timeline, as long as when Edge arrived, he put on a good show. Cleaning up loose ends. Though Dacheldor was basically free to act as he pleased, he observed Bylon performing specific actions to see that some outcomes that had happened previously still occurred. Through manipulation of various organizations in Limbo, he brought about the seemingly accidental release of Dark Destructor, leading to the eventual joining of Shakarok and Dark Destructor to create the Shakarok. This was only one of many examples Dacheldor witnessed. The Shakarok eventually learned the truth of Dacheldor's lineage and bent knee to him, humbling his name to just Shakarok. Dacheldor accepted his allegiance, though did not take him on as an apprentice. He treated him more as a mercenary who he called upon from time to time when he needed help. Nicole and Derek both ended up in Limbo, and, though Nicole did not become the head general, she became a general when a mysterious death opened up a position. Derek did not work for the Empire, as he had in the past. Rather, the angels had assigned him to observe and protect this realm. Their arrival seemed too convenient to Dacheldor, and he assumed Bylon's involvement was assured. Bylon also spent a lot of time with Dacheldor, seemingly trying to convince him of their great mutual friendship. This irritated Dacheldor, as he knew it was an act, and believed it to be part of Bylon's way of getting him to trust him. Still, it afforded Dacheldor the ability to observe how Bylon worked, and he learned much about using subtle manipulation across timelines from watching him. A few days before Edge's arrival in Limbo, Bylon spoke to Darkfire about a rare artifact located in the realm Dacheldor originally called home. Darkfire agreed to send Dacheldor there to retrieve the artifact, a mission that would take several days. Dacheldor knew well what was going on. Bylon was sending him away so that Darkfire could face Edge alone, the exact same way it had happened in the previous timelines. This would ensure Darkfire was thrown through the portal of trials and eventually became a Realm Lord. Dacheldor played along. He went to the other realm, retrieved the artifact, and returned a few days later to find Edge invading Limbo and Darkfire missing. He traveled to Edge's location and battled him, all the while dulling his power so it would not be noticed. He knew that he should now be an even match for the Realm Lord prodigy, but could not risk Bylon finding that out. Edge tested Dacheldor, and Dacheldor pretended to be unable to beat him. He fought just well enough to prove to Edge he was a worthy candidate for becoming a Realm Lord. All the while, Bylon stayed back, keeping an eye on everything. Finally, Edge opened the portal of trials and tossed Dacheldor into it. The portal teleported him elsewhere, but did nothing more. The portal would not work as designed since he was a full Realm Lord already. Instead, it dissipated after sending him to a new realm. Bylon had no way of knowing this, and would expect everything to be on course. Dacheldor sensed his surroundings widely and felt no trace of Bylon's presence. He was finally alone and free to do as he wished. Opening a portal of his own, Dacheldor traveled to the Prime Realm, then flew into the vortex at its base. Using all of his spiritual power, he opened a portal to his own realm and stepped through. In front of him emerged his true ancient self. It reached out to touch him and become one with him, as they had in every other timeline. "Now I'll know the truth," Dacheldor said, as he reached out to his ancient self and absorbed him into himself. The two became one. The destruction of the cosmos. In a flash, Dacheldor knew everything the Ancient had ever known. He knew what it was to truly be an Ancient. He knew the minds and thoughts of every being to ever live in the Ancient's realm. He knew himself as fully as ever. He even knew how to manipulate the very fabric of the cosmos. The Ancient merged with the host's soul, but inside the host's body. In fact, the entire realm pulled inside out and entered the host's body. It existed simultaneously in the cosmos and within him. Dacheldor's eyes were open to truths of the cosmos that others only dream of. He understood how everything worked and fit together. He could hear the whispers of the other ancients and of the cosmos itself. Everything was alive and available to him. His body tremored. Energy started pouring out of him. His skin cracked. Light shot out from between the cracks. He felt himself destabilizing. His body could not contain the seemingly infinite power generated by the realm. Something inside of him stirred, a black spot in the center of the light. It was erratic, causing the energy to rage out violently and build endlessly. Dacheldor realized if he could not keep his body together, not only would he die, but it would cause a seemingly infinite explosion, one that very well might obliterate every realm it touched, one that might reach every realm, one that might destroy the cosmos. He knew he could not contain the explosion forever. He struggled to contain it at all. At the most, he had a few moments before his body would fail. Dacheldor grieved for the fate of the cosmos. He should have trusted Bylon. He should not have been so reckless. He could not believe it would all end because of him. Time shifted around him. moving in reverse. Bylon was going back in time, obviously trying to stop this from happening. Unfortunately, because Dacheldor was an aberration now, moving back in time did not undo what happened. He was permanently merged with his ancient self. His body was still about to explode. Time stopped entirely, and a bubble of magenta energy surrounded Dacheldor. He noticed he could still move, as if time was not stopped, but everything outside the bubble was halted. He also noticed that Bylon was not the cause. A voice spoke inside Dacheldor's mind, like 12 or 13 distinct voices echoing at once.
Finally,
it said,
you have done it in such a way that Bylon cannot undo it.
A living shadow being, a wraith, appeared to Dacheldor inside the bubble. It introduced itself as Prime the Fireside, an aberration with power over time that rivaled Bylon's. It explained that it had an ongoing secret rivalry with Bylon over the fate of the cosmos, and that this moment was the one it had been waiting for. Prime extended a hand and offered Dacheldor 2 golden bands, one for each wrist. He explained these bands were forged by the Great Smith, strongest and wisest of the Realm Lord Smiths, in a time long forgotten. The bands were for this specific occasion. They could absorb seemingly limitless energy and recycle it in a lesser format back to the wearer. With them, Dacheldor would be severely weakened, but his body would be stable. They were known as the Limit Bracers. Dacheldor placed the bands around his wrists, which resembled a pair of golden handcuffs without a chain to connect them. He felt the power flow out of him into the bands. He was too weak to even move. Then, a manageable portion of the energy was returned from the bands. As it flowed into him, his body healed itself and stabilized. Dacheldor could tell that his power and abilities were severely hampered by this. He was roughly as powerful as he had been when he originally faced the Overlord in the first timeline. Though he still recalled all that the Ancient knew, and all that he knew as a Realm Lord, he did not have the needed energy to execute the maneuvers of full Realm Lords or to alter reality using the powers of his ancient self. This sacrifice, he believed, was worth it to save the cosmos. He thanked Prime for saving him and saving the cosmos with him. Prime laughed a hideous laugh. He did not care about the safety of the cosmos or its people. He had a plan of his own, something that required another aberration's help, one powerful enough to absorb an ancient. He planned to use Dacheldor to assist in these plans, plans that would eventually lead to the utter defeat of his enemy, Bylon. Dacheldor agreed to help him. What choice did he have? Without the Limit Bracers, the cosmos would be destroyed, and his only hope to be stable without them would be to train while wearing them and to follow Prime's lead. Prime removed the bubble from around them, and time began moving backward again. When time finally started moving normally again, Dacheldor found himself in his quarters in Castle Darkfire, a few days before the arrival of the Overlord. Prime was standing next to him. Bylon burst into the door, outraged. He demanded an explanation from Dacheldor, seemingly unable to notice Prime. Dacheldor showed only confusion, claiming to not know what Bylon was talking about. Prime laughed, but Bylon did not hear him. It seemed only Dacheldor could see and hear Prime. Bylon looked Dacheldor over, but sensed no emanating energy from him. He also did not appear to notice the Limit Bracers. Dacheldor could hear Bylon's thoughts saying, "If he was an aberration, going back in time would not have worked. Maybe I was wrong. He could not have done this on purpose." Bylon apologized to Dacheldor for barging in. Prime requested Dacheldor to keep playing dumb. He insisted to Dacheldor that any indication to Bylon that he was aware of other timelines would be fatal to everyone. Dacheldor nodded. Bylon's thoughts were full of concern. He had no idea why Dacheldor had ended up trying to merge with his ancient self again. It seemed that no matter what he tried, something always led Dacheldor to do this in every timeline. Could there be another person manipulating time he was unaware of? Prime laughed verbosely, but Bylon could not hear him. Bylon settled his thoughts and simply said to Dacheldor, "I've told you of your destiny. I swear I will try to free you from it." Now Dacheldor knew Bylon had not been lying to him all along. It pained him in the pit of his stomach to know that he could never tell Bylon the truth. He needed to remain sided with Prime, or the cosmos would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Bylon would continue to try to keep Dacheldor from merging with himself, not knowing it had already happened. This left Prime free to do whatever it was he was planning. As Bylon left, Dacheldor asked Prime to explain his plan, and what all this was about, but Prime refused.
"You do not need to know my plan,"
Prime said.
"Just know I am always watching you."
Prime vanished without a trace, but Dacheldor felt sure he could not stray from his agreement. He would have to continue convincing Bylon he was not an aberration. For now, that was all he knew of Prime's plan. Sometimes Dacheldor wondered if siding with Prime was the wrong decision, but he always stopped himself with two questions. If Prime had not come and saved him, what would have happened? If Prime wanted the cosmos destroyed, why save him? These two questions guaranteed there was much more to Prime than what Dacheldor knew. He would have to bide his time and find out more.